Good afternoon, everybody. We are so happy to see all of you on our English Without Borders webinar series. And as we celebrate Black History Month, we also try to make more interactive and more interesting webinars for our audience. And today we are very happy to host Dr. John Miglietta, who will talk about African American inventors. Just to give some introduction about our speaker, John Miglietta received his Ph.D. in politics from New York University in 1995. He's a professor of political science at Tennessee State University in Nashville, Tennessee. His research areas are international security, American foreign policy, as well as Middle East and Central Asian politics. He has published the following books, such as American Alliance Policy in the Middle East by Lexington Books in 2002, Introduction to Political Science and Anthology, Cognella Publishers in 2021, and Hitler Allies, German Alliance Politics in World War II, Routledge Publishers in 2022. John Mcgliete is a Fulbright Fellow in Tajikistan for 2021-2022. And with great honor and with big pleasure, I'm just giving the floor to Dr. John Mcgliete. Thank you very much. Dear audience, please put your questions in the chat box for our speaker, so he will address them after his presentation. Thank you. Dr. John.
I want to thank English Without Borders for hosting me. And the presentation I'm going to do today is on African American inventors in honor of Black History Month. Black History Month was created, or was actually started out as Black History Week in 1926, and it became Black History Month in 1976 when President Ford signed the proclamation. And again, in the United States, we have month-long panel discussions and events honoring the contributions of African Americans to American society and really the world. So I'm very happy to be able to bring you this short presentation. So we're going to start looking at, as I said, it's African American inventors. These are everyday products and practices which were created by African Americans. So the first is Benjamin, and again, by the way, I should say this is not an exhaustive list. For reasons of time, I only had to pick some people to talk about. I try to give as broad a representation as possible with the different fields, etc. But I know I left out a lot of people, so I would encourage people to read and research this issue on their own if you're interested. The first individual I'm going to talk about is Benjamin Banneker. Benjamin Banneker lived from 1731 to 1806. He was a mathematician and a surveyor, and he completed the first almanac in 1792. That's a book of general facts and figures and things like that. And you may be familiar with almanacs that are, written today. He actually presented this almanac to Thomas Jefferson. He participated in the initial building of Washington, D.C. Again, he was a surveyor, so he helped lay out the different streets and buildings and whatnot. Washington, D.C. was built to be the capital of the United States. And if you look at the original 13 states, Washington, D.C. is essentially halfway north and south. And that was sort of the agreement among the various states. They wanted a capital that was roughly kind of in the middle and hopefully not biased towards either north or south. The next inventor that I want to talk about is Thomas Jennings. Thomas Jennings lived from 1791 to 1856. And essentially, he invented dry cleaning clothes. Essentially, he invented a process to dry clean clothes. And he was the first African American to hold a patent. This is where his invention is registered with the US. And if other people want to use that, they have to, pay him royalties or pay him for the patent and things like that. And also acknowledges that he was the first person to do whatever process or invention that got patented. He used his resources to fund the abolitionist movement to ban slavery. And again, he died right before the Civil War. Slavery, the issue of slavery was very, very important in American history, particularly from the 1830s, 1840s, 1850s, and the several decades leading up to the Civil War in the 1860s. So he used a lot of his resources and contributed to the abolitionist movement. Lewis Latimer is another individual. Lewis Latimer lived from 1848 to 1928. He worked with Thomas Edison, and he developed a carbon filament for the electric light bulb. Now, he didn't invent the electric light bulb. Edison is credited with inventing the electric light bulb, but the carbon filament essentially made the electric light bulb and electric lamps affordable for the average person. Otherwise, the cost would have been just prohibitively expensive. So this made electric lights more readily available. So while he didn't invent the light bulb, he invented a process by which the light bulb became sort of, forgive the pun, but a fixture in American homes and businesses, and then really the world as well. George Washington Carver is one of the more famous African-American inventors. Carver, who's pictured here, was an agricultural chemist. He improved farming by working with various crops and vegetables. He pioneered what is today modern crop rotation by discovering that planting peanuts could revitalize the soil. Carver did a lot of his work in Tuskegee, Alabama, at what is now known as Tuskegee University. And again, the American South, particularly at that time, was an important cotton growing region. And cotton really takes a lot of nutrients out of the soil. So he was trying to figure out ways, okay, how can we revitalize the soil? How can we put nutrients back into the soil? Because once you have a couple of crops of cotton, it really drains the soil. And he discovered that planting sweet potatoes, reinvigorated the soil. So he developed this idea of what has become modern day crop rotation, rotating cotton with peanuts or sweet potatoes or other crops to rebuild the soil. So he was a pioneer in this. One of the first African-American women entrepreneurs was Sarah Bredlov Walker. She's often known in history as Madam C.J. Walker. 1867 to 1919 was her dates, and she was a pioneer in the development of African-American beauty products for women. Again, this was a market that the modern cosmetics industry had largely ignored, and she developed beauty products that were designed essentially for African-American women, and she became the first Black female to be a millionaire. So she was very successful in her company. Okay. Granville Woods is the next person I'm going to discuss. He is often called the Black Edison because he invented a number of different processes and inventions and held a number of different patents. In 1884, he gained a patent for a steam boiler for the railroad industry. He also developed railroad braking and electrical systems. And he also developed improvements in the telegraph and telephone, which were purchased by corporations. Again, that's why people who often invented something didn't necessarily produce things or got a patent, didn't necessarily produce things themselves, but they often sold it to companies who wanted to mass market it. And that's what Granville Woods was able to do, particularly with his innovations regarding the telegraph and the telephone. Elijah McCoy is a very interesting individual. He developed a lubricating oil for trains. Again, locomotives, a number of different pieces of equipment, gears grinding together. It needs constant lubrication. And he perfected this lubricating oil. And his oil was so good that railway engineers insisted on his product over other cheaper alternatives. And this is where the English expression comes from. When something is the actual product, they call it the Real Mccoy. Basically, that comes from this individual because engineers said, I want the Real Mccoy. In other words, I want Elijah McCoy's lubricating oil. I don't want a cheap knockoff from somebody else. So that I didn't know that until I started researching Black history and looking at inventors. I'm like, oh, that's where that expression comes from. I hadn't known that. So you learn something new all the time when you read and research even topics that are not your primarily field of interest. You learn a lot of new things. Charles Drew was very, very significant, and really the world owes a debt to Charles Drew. Charles Drew unfortunately died young, as you can see from his dates, 1904 to 1950. He developed an improved technique for blood storage. This led to the creation of blood plasma and blood banks. So in other words, when people donated blood, they were able to save that blood and store it for subsequent operations and medical procedures and things like that. Prior to his invention, it was like, okay, somebody donated blood, you pretty much had to use it right away, or else it couldn't be saved. But this helped revolutionize surgery, made surgeries easier and more practical. It greatly improved the ability to conduct surgeries. Garrett Morgan, he did a number of inventions, as I said, including the gas mask and the first modern traffic light. So I always think about Garrett Morgan whenever, as I was walking to the office here today, I'm passing a number of street lights, traffic signals and things like that. And, think about big cities or even small towns, keeping traffic moving and whatnot. And, we owe so much to just having traffic lights and things like that. So both for pedestrians and motorists. Alexander Miles developed, or he didn't develop the elevator, but he perfected the elevator. He developed elevator doors that automatically open and close. So again, think about how important the elevator is and how, you can have bigger, taller buildings because you have elevators. And, the fact that they open and close automatically is important. You don't have to mess with the doors and make sure they're latched properly and for safety and all these other sorts of things. So this helped make possible the construction of large modern skyscrapers. Finally, last but not least, and again, as I mentioned at the very beginning, this is not an exhaustive list. I mean, there are many, many other people, but Daniel Hale Williams, who lived from 1856 to 1931, he was the first to do open heart surgery. And again, think about, at that time when he did it, he was the first pioneer in doing it. Now heart surgeries are relatively common, and people live longer lives, more fuller lives, because they're able to have heart surgery. They're able to have a valve or something replaced, whereas before they couldn't do it, and that was pretty much it. They gave you essentially comfort care, and then you passed away, and that was it. Now you're able to fix these things. I'm not going to say it's a minor operation, but it's still a major operation, but it is fairly commonplace these days. So again, that's sort of a brief, very brief discussion of African American inventors and some of the products and practices that they developed, which are very, very important for us today. And I believe now there's a couple of polls that you're going to be asked to answer a few questions about the presentation. So we'll see if we can get those up and you can see how much you remembered. So what invention did Lewis Latimer perfect? And it looks like everyone got it correct. That was the electric light bulb. Now remember, he didn't invent the light bulb, but he invented a carbon filament that essentially made the light bulb much more practical to use and much more inexpensive. So the second one is the first open heart surgery was done by, and you have several options there. Ben Carson, Charles Drew, Daniel Hale Williams, or Benjamin Spock. Well, the correct answer is Daniel Hale Williams. So several of you got that right. Charles Drew, of course, invented or perfected the way to save blood plasma, and made possible modern day blood banks. Ben Carson was or is a noted, I believe he's a pediatric surgeon in the United States. He also was Housing and Urban Development Secretary under the Trump administration, and he was a candidate for the Republican presidential nomination in 2016. Benjamin Spock is a noted child psychiatrist from the child psychologist from like the 1960s, 1970s. Let's see. So we have, I think we had a question in chat. Oh no, we actually had a third question here. Or did we? Let's scroll down. True or false? Madam C.J. Walker was the first female African-American by developing for Black women. And the answer is true. She was also the first female African-American millionaire because she made a lot of money with her investments. That was a very untapped market. And then finally, who is called the Black Edison? And we were all over the map here with this, but it is actually no one got it right. It was Granville Woods was called the Black Edison. Other choices were Lewis Latimer, Garrett Morgan, Benjamin Banneker. They all did various things in practices, but it was Granville Woods who was called the Black Edison because he had a number of different patents, mostly involving the railroad industry, but also the telegraph and the telephone. George Washington Carver found what crop revitalized the soil, and this helped him promote crop rotation in agriculture. And the correct answer for that was peanuts. Peanuts, very, very important. Okay, so let's go to the chat. If I can, let's see if I can get out of here and go to the chat. Can someone read the question from the chat for me? I'm sorry,
Yes.
I'm not able to.
We have some questions, Dr. John. So the first question, did the African American inventors struggle to obtain patent for their inventions?
Oh, well, yes, many of them did, because of the general climate at the time. If you remember from the presentation, most of them were active in the very first part of the 20th century. And for example, the two doctors I mentioned, Charles Drew and Daniel Hale Williams, obviously, had biases in education, but yet they persevered. They got a medical degree, they were practicing, and they were able to do a number of different innovations which helped to revolutionize medicine. Same is true for the other inventors. But when an idea is good and it's potentially very profitable, people saw that, well, regardless of who did it, and they were able to utilize that to better everyone's life. And hopefully the inventors got at least some financial compensation themselves. A lot of people argue, though, that a lot of what Edison did really was Lewis Latimer's work. And maybe Latimer got some credit, but maybe he should have gotten more credit.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we have next question. Were most of the Black inventors recognized for the inventions they made?
Eventually they were. Many, although really it wasn't until I was researching, and in the United States, I work at a historically Black college and university. So that's how I came to know most of these folks. Unfortunately, in education in the United States, a lot of this is not taught as part of the curriculum. And I think a lot of people are very ignorant about the contributions that African Americans made to science, to technology, to medicine, etc. So I really, I thought that I was really amazed at that. I was like, really, I had not known about this. Was not taught this in school. it was just working in a predominantly, African-American university and dealing with these topics and reading about it that I realized, oh, okay, this is something that I was not exposed to in my education in a major way. I mean, maybe tangentially with a few people I've heard of them and whatnot, but not as in-depthly.
Thank you very much. We have next question. What were the basic challenges for the Blacks to be involved in creating and inventing things?
Well, again, they probably had to put up with just the basic prejudice against African Americans, particularly those in the first part of the 20th century. That, oh, well, how could a Black person come up with this, or this is somehow not as good as what we've been using and things like that. But as I said, quality rose to the surface, and you had railroad engineers clamoring for Elijah McCoy's lubricating oil. Now they may not have realized Elijah McCoy was Black, I don't know, but they said, hey, this is by far the best product, and it's the safest for us to use, so we want that, essentially. How about, I'm sorry, I didn't see that last question. Can someone read it?
Yeah. How about Black women inventors? Were any of them able to get recognition?
Well, I mean, someone like Madam C.J. Walker, because she had the foresight to tap into a market that was being ignored, so she got at least some recognition within her own community. I don't know necessarily about the society at large, but at least within her own community, and she was able to be financially, very, very successful, because this was a market that, cosmetics companies were ignoring. They figured, oh, well, Black women, we'll just take what they give to everybody else. And they didn't care, or they didn't realize that there are certain beauty products that you needed to tailor to African-American women, and they just hadn't bothered to do that.
Okay. Yes, such an interesting topic, because like inventions and inventors, they are always emerging.
Yeah. I mean, you never know where the next great invention is going to come from. I mean, several people basically invented the internet and the personal computer kind of out of their garage or out of their basement or whatever, and they had this idea and they had the skills and the knowledge to do this. I mean, Facebook started as basically a computer network at a dorm at a university, and from there it kind of mushroomed into what we know today. So you never know where the next invention is going to come from, and some people actually do the inventing, and other people kind of have the foresight to recognize, hey, this has certain potentials, and they do it. Hopefully the original inventors do get some compensation for it, obviously, so their efforts do not go unrewarded. And that's why in the US you have the patents, because once you patent something, and then if somebody wants to use it, they have to pay you rights to do that. So I mean, so that was very important as well.
Okay, we have next question. Have any of the Black inventors received famous awards such as the Nobel Prize or something like that?
I know African Americans have won the Nobel Prize. I don't know if any of the ones I specifically mentioned, I don't think they won a Nobel Prize, but I know like Martin Luther King received the Nobel Peace Prize. Various other scientists in recent years, African American scientists, have won Nobel Prizes in various fields. It probably took a long time coming, and the same thing for women in many cases. Now you see women winning more Nobel Prizes than maybe in the past. But as careers open to women and open to different minorities, you're seeing more and more that they're sharing the top honors, and they're getting the various prizes, and they're getting recognition, although that does take a long time coming. And I'm reminded of the movie Hidden Figures, where it was several African-American women who worked for NASA who really provided a lot of the calculations, which ended up making the first space flights possible. This is the age, before really supercomputers and whatnot, and a lot of calculations had to be done by hand, and they were really, really terrific at doing that. And fortunately, they did get recognition kind of later in life, but maybe not right at the time.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay,
Dr.
well, thank
John.
you.
So the audience, if you have any questions, please let us know. And I think this presentation is a very good material for English language teachers to use it to celebrate Black History Month every year, and also just to raise awareness of the students about the inventors, the Black inventors, and also those who receive recognition due to their inventions. So it also helps to enhance students' awareness about Black History Month, and also the impact that Black inventors made in the science and also in the history of the US. Thank you very much. And the audience will be sharing this presentation and also the presentation of Dr. John Mcgliete from last week on our website. Please follow us, and you will be able to have access to this presentation to use in your classroom. Thank you very much. Please stay tuned on us and follow our regular activities and also online activities through the English Without Borders network. Dr. John, using this moment, I would like to express our deep gratitude for a very comprehensive presentation about African American inventors. Yeah, and we really deeply appreciate your time and also your hard work to deliver your presentation to the audience as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. And I want to thank all the staff at English Without Borders. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.